Hey, good morning. It's April 18th. I wasn't convinced we were live because the intro video was not playing on YouTube or Twitch, at least.
Really?
Yeah. It was just showing the static background. But I don't know. I don't know. However, now it looks like we're talking,
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure how that started. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a slight, it's just like I had to do on the last episode, which I went in and cut this pre-production part. Let me start again here.
Yeah.
So good morning and welcome to the Dev Talk Show. It's April 18th, 2025, a Friday, getting ready for the weekend. This year's flying by. I can't believe we're already, almost through April. And it's still kind of crisp mornings here on the U.S. East Coast and here in the Mid-Atlantic, I think. I mean, I've still got sweaters on. So
I had mine on when I took the dog out. So yes, that's
yeah. Yeah, it's one of those. Everything's just flying by, right? That's how it always is.
That's it. Yeah, can't stop the time thing.
I know.
We're just trying to get some stuff done, which is cool.
So we've been here on the Dev Talk Show working on an application that we would like to use to manage, manage a user group, post events, have people sign up. And we think we'll be able to explore a lot of topics, including topics like Blazor, minimal APIs, .NET Aspire, NoSQL databases. I think some things we haven't gotten to yet is authentication, authorization, stuff like that. So,
yeah, and CI/CD it all up to the cloud, right?
Yeah. So we haven't even touched on that, right? Is how do we want this to deploy and everything like that? So,
yeah. And we've been working on this out in the open. So up on the GitHub site for the Dev Talk Show, I've been doing, or at least the last couple of shows, have been post-show, basically doing a check-in of wherever we are and just kind of pushing it up there. So that if you go out there and look at our Orbital site, which is the code name for the application here, and basically those check-ins that we did. I'm keeping them right now in different branches. Nothing has basically been brought back down to the main branch yet. So we have the API layer, which is the current one that we're working on. And probably can share my screen at this point, I think. This way we can kind of see what we're looking at. Bring this back. Is it that one? The overlay.
Yeah. Yeah, the scenes seem to have gotten dumped. I wish you could lock these scenes, but it doesn't. I don't know that you can. So, okay, that's fine.
Cool. Okay, so yeah, so this is again up on DevTalkShow's website or repo, and if we look at the branch, we're actually working in the API layer. So this is the one that has all the latest changes in it. Main, I have to do a pull request up to main at some point. But yeah, so what we did last time and kind of where we got things started was we had our data, we created a minimal API, and we started writing things to our database. Now, the database we were writing to was the one in Azure, and that was because, well, it was kind of a known quantity. We knew how to connect to it. We had something that we could pretty much get to it with some Azure credentials that I had and being able to connect up there. So using our Azure default credentials and making a client and doing that. What this did though, and I'm sure anybody from the Aspire team watching this is saying like, well, that's not how we do it in Aspire. Because if we think about it here, so this program file for API manager or for the API layer, and this is the program file for the app host, which is the thing that kind of wires up all these projects so that we can Aspireify them. We're using essentially this Azure Cosmo DB instance, and we're saying run it as an emulator, which is fine. And we know when we did that in our other program, we basically created a connection to using the Cosmo client in anything that might be consuming those Aspire created products. And so having that that NuGet package that is the Cosmo client connection we basically said, well, hey, we're going to make a connection to it here. And this would totally work. But what we did was then instantiate our own Cosmo client here. So we weren't using, because what happens is if we look at this method, what we get is, let me see if I can hold this. No, actually, hang on. Yeah, it did work. What we end up getting, this is kind of important, it registers a Cosmo client for dependency injection down the, as part of this project. And we didn't do that. We basically created our own from scratch.
Yeah,
So
right.
I didn't realize that. I thought we were,
Well, I think it's similar to. I was going to double check by by looking at the at a template, but I think when you create a new Aspire, when you do the starter project,
right.
I think that they take some steps to create an HTTP client, but I'm not 100% sure. And as you were talking, I was saying, I feel like I've watched a video or two where the person running through it says, okay, now let's register. And I admit there's a lot here where I think, again, you watch, you might watch a video or something, and then you sit down to do it yourself, and it's like, okay, wait, well, what are all the things they're doing again?
Right.
So I can't seem to find it, but I feel like I've seen something very similar where you and so right now, if I can just double check looking at your code, the program CS that you're in is the app host.
Sorry, no. The program CS that we're in here is the Orbital API one.
Okay. So then
the app
when
host is the other one. I can switch to it, but I didn't know what you were going in for.
Oh, so when you add, you add an Azure Cosmos client here. That's the web now. The web application. You're adding a singleton version of that client.
Yeah.
So you don't have to create it every time. You could just retrieve that service when you're, and that'll be nice to look at too.
Yeah.
You were talking about how. Here's what I think is. Here's what's interesting when I look at that IntelliSense. This add Azure Cosmos client.
Yeah.
This is coming from the Aspire integration.
Yeah. So everything. So I'm not the Aspire expert. I'm kind of learning this as you guys are hearing about as well. So I'm trying to choose my words carefully. So there are two. When you want to bring something into Aspire, you need two portions of that object. So if we're bringing in Cosmo DB in this case, right, there is packages and registration that happen in the app host. So there's a specific NuGet package, and we probably can go here real quick and show it. So we have here. So we have essentially the Cosmo DB hosting, Aspire hosting Azure Cosmo. And that's on the app host side. And then if we go over to the actual kind of the project or the coding side of it, we have a different one in that it's not hosting, it's Aspire Microsoft Azure Cosmos. So it's part of the Aspire family. So it's got the connections to go back to the app host and know, hey, what things got registered over there. But it is more a client side capabilities, and that's why we get things like Cosmo client, the database object, the container object. All of those live over in that space inside of there.
Okay, yeah. Right. So what I was looking at, which I'll get into the show notes here, is the .NET Aspire Azure Cosmos DB integration page on Learn.
Yep.
And I saw the first part, aspire.hosting Azure Cosmos DB, but I still have to catch up on
all the way down the bottom of the page because they look at the Cosmos has a number of different ways of
client integration
doing
here,
that.
right? Okay.
Yep. Yeah. And then once you get it's just past the Linux one.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So to get started with the .NET Aspire Azure Cosmos DB client integration, and you just pointed this out, install aspire.microsoft.azure.cosmos in the client consuming project. I love how they They're trying to find a way to
Because it could be
describe it,
anything.
right? Yeah, they're trying to. Yeah, right, right.
For us, it's our API layer, our minimal API in this case. So that's what we did. So now that I've got this here, and we had it in there last time, but we really didn't use it. I can go to my program file on my API side and say, well, I've got this. And my initial thought was, well, can't I just do this? Right? Because that's what I do on the app host. Right now, I've got an object here that I can kind of run with and do whatever I need. It doesn't work that way because this actually returns a void. But what it sets it up for is it sets this Cosmo client to be as part of the builder services so I can use it for dependency injection. So I could do something like this. Let me see. I was playing around with something earlier, and this is one of the rare things I brought in that I made earlier. So this is just a class called Orbital Data, and that class has its own, or I've injected a Cosmo client into it. So this would be the client that is wired up on the app host, made available to us because we said from the builder, go add the Azure Cosmos that got wired up because that Cosmo, this reference here is the same in both places, here and in the app host.
Okay. Yeah.
And if I'm, let me know if I need to kind of walk through that again, but
I think that makes sense.
okay.
I mean, it did to me, and I'm just trying to think of like, hey, if I'm watching this show for the first time.
Yep. Yeah, I'm using you as the audience at this point to kind of check me here. So this is pretty cool, right? So we actually have a way of dependency injecting things that got created in the app host that we want to use inside of this project to bring anywhere without rewiring them up. So everything I did down here with, hey, let's go ahead and figure out what the client account is and my default Azure credential, don't need to do any of that because that all got handled by the app host.
Yeah. Okay, good.
And especially this thing here at the end of the show that we tried to create by saying, hey, I've got a local running version of the emulator. Let me just drop the connection string in there and make it happen. Don't need to do that.
Yeah. I mean, because where we're trying to get to, and again, it was the last 5 minutes we wanted to see it work in the emulator.
Yeah.
Or at least try to, which if I recall correctly, that didn't happen. And so we just said, yeah, but that's okay. Is the whole point, well, one of the many points of Aspire is that one of the pain points that I remember being heralded like day one, the first time it was shown to the world was, hey, remember how when you pull a project down and now you got to replace all the connection strings and all of the touch points with whatever it is for what you're doing, whether you're working locally, whether you're talking to some dev environment, which is a very common scenario at workplaces. Is that, oh, well, we have a dev environment and you connect to our dev SQL server and our dev this and our dev that. That's a very common workflow. And I feel like what Aspire does, if let's say you're in that situation at work now, is this could be the beginning of shifting towards the 100% local on your machine flow. Because if your team used this, one team member can keep doing things the way you've always done, pointing to those dev environment connections. And then you could say, yeah, well, I'm going to start doing it all 100% locally. Kind of what I think of in my head as like airplane ready coding. Yeah. That if I'm totally disconnected, this still works. And I don't necessarily know as a developer that you're striving to do that. You're striving to have that so that you can get on a cross-country flight. It's more of, do I have everything isolated here to my machine? I just feel like it gets you one step closer to a lot of repeatability, a lot of confidence that we know how the app is put together, because there isn't like, well, it only really works when I connect up to the dev environment. Okay, well, what's the missing piece? What's the missing something?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, totally. Okay. And I think, while not completely making it disconnected, I think one of the things that kind of helps it, and this is, you mentioned authentication, maybe one of those things we have to eventually drill into. But this line here of default credential, Azure default credential, right? We haven't talked about that. We just kind of wired it up and it worked. But
Yep.
that's really a very powerful and configurable way of connecting to the Azure environment using either my local credentials because I'm signed into my Visual Studio or my into my VS Code to with my Azure account. So it's saying, hey, I know who you are. I'll just take that token that's already signed in with and use it. Or when you start to move things into the cloud, looking for things like managed identity. So I don't have to change anything here. It just kind of goes through the progression of, do I have it? Do I have it? Do I have it? I got this. Okay, let's use it and see if it has permissions to do what we're asking it to do.
Yeah, that's going to be exciting because I know as we were writing this code, and in fact, you even see it in documentation now and then where they're like, well, the default Azure credential will help. And then what I see in a lot of their samples, because the samples aren't necessarily .NET Aspire samples, they're Azure samples, is that right there, well, maybe not necessarily right there, but in line 28, where we're detecting whether we are a development environment, they'll set up those local things, those local versions, where we'll just use your local credential. But then elsewhere, it's like, no, we got to grow up now and use a service principal or a managed identity, because we're not going to be doing that in production. It's going, like you said, it's going to be, at least it should be, which will be nice to, I think it'll be nice to get to all that, setting up the managed identity, and then seeing how does this work from source control, local development, publish to deployment, and everything's just doing the right thing, and we're not necessarily changing settings everywhere. So
yeah, and I think back to your earlier point of, having to figure out what the connection string is when I bring down the project to make sure everything wires up. It's moving away from that as well, because connection strings are inherent, they're leaky, right? Once it gets out there, now you've got to worry about changing keys and things, and you get to a point where you don't even have to worry about checking them in because we're not authenticating that way anymore.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Except in demos, because it's nice and quick and easy to do.
I know. And that's the thing, is that I see a lot of, and it's not, this isn't just a Aspire thing or even an ASP.NET thing or anything specific. You see a lot of demos where on stage, standing in front of people, this is the simplest, quickest way to get going, but it leaves you in the audience saying, well, wait, what are we supposed to be doing in production?
Right.
So
there's always that next question. So what I'm going to do is we don't need any of this. So I'm going to basically comment all that out, Control K, Control C. We don't need any of this as well. So let me take care of that. KC. And so that leaves us some issues here with things like containers that are no longer have a reference to an object. So what I can do here is, in this case, drop in Cosmos client, call it client, and so that's there. So, but now what I can do is I can say var container. Love the ghost text here. So we're basically going to say, I want you to create a container object, and you're going to do it by going to use the Cosmos client container, talking to the Orbital database and the meetings container. So that's what we're getting back. Now, we can kind of keep going and just kind of do the same thing here. So, and there might be an easier way to, or a more straightforward way to do this, but right now I'm just kind of coding on the fly here and thinking it through. Yep, same thing. And then down here, and that. Oh, it didn't. I was anticipating. There we go. Okay. So now we've got all the pieces in place. So this should now be mapping us back to the Cosmos we have here, which is actually our emulator. Okay. So I go back to this. Let's run it.
And that was in the app host just a second ago?
That other look here is the app host. Yes.
Okay. So one thing I'm finding when working with Aspire is that you start to have multiple program CS tabs open,
And it's confusing which is
and you
which.
get lost as to which one is which, and sometimes start, oh, let me just add that and then you realize, oh wait, I'm in the wrong one. So
Yep. Yeah, we need something. It's. I mean, I usually tell just by hovering over, because you get the little pop up there that says, "Hey,
yep,
which project is this for?"
sure,
But that takes, it gets
yep,
you got to wait.
yep,
Which isn't always fun. So let's go back to here. Let's open our Data Explorer, and you'll see we have, in this case, it's already got an orbital and it's already got a meetings. Where did that come from? Well, that came from the fact that on our app host program CES, we said, go ahead and create those things for us. So, and then we said, do data volume and lifetime persistence. So all of the data and all of that basically persists if we rebuild the container or what have you. So now that that is there, what am I missing? I'm missing my my tester.http. Let's bring that back. So this is that tester file, so that we could go ahead and make a HTTP request. I could do this one here, send a request for, oh, I have data in there. I forgot. I was testing this and I forgot to wipe the data. Darn, that was supposed to fail.
Okay.
All right, let's do this.
You wanted a 404 basically?
Yeah. So
okay.
I could probably do this and rerun it. Yeah, and it comes back with a 404 not found. And then you could look at the message here, document does not exist in the collection, right? So it's gone ahead and said, hey, this isn't, it's not a thing. And then we can go ahead and now send a request to go ahead and put one in and run that again. And now we got it. So we're connecting to, now where are we connecting? We're connecting to, nope. Where are we? This one. There we go. Our emulator. So if I look at meetings, items, you can see we have a whole collection of objects in here, including the number 4, which we just put in place.
Yeah. Okay.
So not bad. So we got that going. If we wanted to go, there is a way. So we also had that database that was sitting up in Azure.
Okay.
And so is this one here?
Right. Right. So the one you just showed, you're using the Data Explorer locally in the Cosmos DB emulator, but this is the live one. Well, I guess they're both live, but this is actually out on Azure. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Now we could swap that, or I don't know if we want to go down this path, but there is a way, and it's in the documentation, where you can basically say, not here, in the app host.
Okay.
Like, great. This one is wired up to be using this particular, or using the run as preview emulator, right? I could, and I'll stop the code or the program there. I could come down and say, var.
Oh, I see. Add a second Cosmos DB.
Yep.
Okay.
And we can't. Whoops. Come on back. We can't call it Cosmo DB because
yeah, you already have one.
Cloud, right?
Right.
Yeah, because we already have one of those. That's right. So I could do this, and then now I've got this other Cosmo instance, and then there's basically a way you reference it via it's called a keyed.
Oh, right. Keyed service.
Yes. Yeah, that's the actual database itself. 1 second. So you would do. That's interesting. Yeah, it has to be like that. So it would probably be something like this, where Keith Cosmos. Oh, this is client. I'm sorry. Well, no.
Well, this is. Oh, I didn't realize there was a extension method.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, to your point, different program CS. So right now in the program CS, we said we got this and we have this. If we go to the API instance,
yeah, here's where you're adding the client. Okay.
and instead of adding the client, we would add a add keyed Azure Cosmo client.
Okay, interesting.
And then we would do the same thing here with Builder. Add keyed Azure Cosmos client. You know that trick? So
no.
See
what
how
did you do?
So see how the method has capital, the Pascal case, I think it's called, right?
Yes, right.
So you basically just type the capital letter, so A, K, C, C, and then it basically filters the list.
It's narrowing it down.
Matches.
Yeah. Okay.
Love that. So now we've got two instances here, and we can choose which one we want to make a connection to, because part of our API, maybe we need to talk sometimes to the one that's in a different database. Maybe it's in this case, we're doing the difference between emulator and cloud, but let's say they were two different Cosmo instances in the cloud, right? We have the ability now to make connections to both of them, make sure they're in sync, or get references from one to add to the other, right? We have whatever it is that our API needs to do. So there's a way to essentially do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And because I feel like before keyed services, keyed services is something that I'm trying to remember when it came in. And let's be clear, keyed services is part of ASP.NET Core.
Okay.
That's what that feature comes from. And I feel like before that, we would do tricks like, well, the dependency injection, I think we would naturally think to ourselves, well, if I need an HTTP client, then I'll just register one with the app. And then when it gets the dependency injection will just pull it in. And then eventually you get to a place where we probably all do is say, well, wait a second, I talk to multiple other services, so I need multiple ready to go HTTP clients. So I feel like inevitably where people landed was, well, I guess I'll write my own interface or maybe my own implementation, and that's what I'll register. It'll kind of wrap the real HTTP client, and I'll register both of those services. So I will have the talking to Azure HTTP client, and I'll have the talking to some other service HTTP client. But what keyed services lets you do is say, okay, if you don't want to, you don't have to go that far.
Right.
Just give these things names and then refer to them. So
that's cool.
That's the point of key. Well, I want to say that's one point of keyed services. I don't necessarily know if I've given the whole sales pitch. I do remember when they were first launched, I think I was even watching .NET Conf going, and immediately trying to think like, what am I going to do with this exactly? And so not because it was bad, you were just wondering like, do I need this? And this is an interesting idea, this to say, okay, there's the local version, there's the cloud version. Because I agree, one interesting thing that I'm going to come back to is how do we write this code so that it's production ready, but also local developer ready, and without it being a hack job, the
whole, / if the development, right?
Yeah. Is that a thing? Can we get? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I think there's certain strides to make it feel that way and to make it happen that way.
Yeah.
So and then I think if we wanted to make sure we reference, I'm just going to go ahead and do. I think it's this, not that. This.
It's an attribute, right?
Surface.
Yeah. But it didn't come up for you. See that?
It did not.
Yeah.
And I think it's because I'm kind of connected there with that Cosmos term.
I think you're right.
And then in this case, it's Cosmos DB.
Right. And then close the square brace.
There you go.
And get rid of the I don't think
what it wants.
I think the problem is the open parenthesis now. in front of Cosmos client.
Oh,
Not
client.
Yeah.
Yes,
It's okay. You were just trying to get some
Yep.
separation there. So that's how I think it should look. So in the code now, we are saying, oh, man, that's interesting. I want that one.
So I want a Cosmo client, and it's great, but I've got two in the dependency injection bucket to pull from. Which one do you want? And this is basically saying, well, from the service, because that's where everything you dependency inject winds up in services. So this is basically saying, from the keyed services that are there, get me the one that's called that.
So you see where I'm coming from. I think we can come up with ways to solve it. Well, where I'm coming from is now we're locked into using the emulator, and not because of anything you've done wrong, but just because of the way the two keyed services have been declared. One is going emulator, one is going cloud.
And that's probably a bad example.
Yeah. We'll figure that out.
Yeah.
Because I think it will be interesting to know. I wonder, even if you're watching and you say, yeah, I've dealt with this. Techniques for having your code be ready for local development and ready for production when using things like ASP.NET Core API or anything. If you've got ideas, throw them in the comments below. Because I bet you we see different techniques from different folks, and there might be some really cool ideas out there. So
yeah.
Okay. No, it's fine. It's fine. We kind of went down another path.
We did a little rabbit hole. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's just to kind of show that, hey, well, that's great. How do I? Yes, we're trying. We're swapping between, but that's not the only way you could be using that. There are other reasons where it makes sense. So let's do that. And then here we can go back to add. We can just get rid of the.
You just don't really need the keyed service right now.
Exactly.
Okay. So then.
So I can get rid of this, even though that's kind of redundant because it should be in there.
And we also no longer need any of the code that is commented out. Like, that's just done.
Yep.
Great. So add Azure.
Which is my configuration for the Azure environment, which we don't need.
Oh, wow. Okay. Add Azure Cosmos client it's part of an Aspire integration. It's used in the client app or the app that's going to use Cosmos.
Yep.
And it's an extension method that pretty much took the place of everything you were doing before to configure a Cosmos client.
Yeah. So what's cool is we now have an API that we can start using and calling from our web front end. And I guess there's we have about a half hour left. I guess there's two paths we can go down. We can quickly wire up the web to the API and kind of show that connection, and maybe create a list or something, some kind of a what do we call it? It's not a data grid. It's Aspire has a certain name or Blazor has a certain name for their grid that they use, but basically put a grid on the Blazor page. That's one thing we could do.
Right. I've actually forgotten the name of it.
Yeah, same.
It's been a while since I've looked at it. The quick grid, I think.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep. So we could do that, or we could focus more on the model stuff and kind of get that right, and then figure out what goes on the web front next time. So I'm kind of.
Well, where are we with the API right now?
So we can write. So we got.
We tried getting the list. Out of curiosity, just to get on meeting.
Oh yeah, that works.
Okay, I didn't know if we'd ever run it live. Maybe we had. I just don't remember. It's possible.
We can run it real quick. Take a couple seconds, but pretty sure we ran that one. I know we ran this one to get the individual one back.
Yeah, we definitely did a read.
Just a second to run up. We don't need a data explorer. We could just do. think it's 7024. Yeah. No, I'm trying to redo it. Yeah, just meetings. Overthinking it. Oops. To execute leaks, set allow synchronous query execution true. Use query item. Get item query iterator to execute asynchronously.
Okay, so I think what happened here is I feel like something has jumped in and realized I can't use this because Link by default wants to be lazy, which I think most of us thought the to list would take care of, but yet there's something here. And look, that's actually all in all a pretty good exception message. They figured out that we're trying to do that. So they're jumping in and saying you either have to set synchronous query execution to true or do something else. So I wonder if there was, I remember the Ghost Code wrote this.
Right.
I wonder if there was a different way that we should have, like once you get the answer out with the meetings, I wonder if there's a different way that we should materialize it before trying to drop it into the result. I don't know.
Yeah, that's.
I'm wondering if we should
just use this, right?
Yeah.
Instead.
Okay.
But now the to list comes back with, well, let's stop this because that's. So it doesn't contain a thing for to list. Okay. But we do want a collection.
Well, I'm wondering, when it comes to implementing like this list here, I'm sure that we're just trying to figure out how to cross this bridge from what you can get back from the container, because you have different methods there, and what this is going to take. I don't think we're trying to produce a stream.
No, because we should just have something serializable.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to kind of move that out.
Yeah, it's possible, but I feel like there's probably something we just don't know yet. So I'm not saying you shouldn't do it.
Okay.
Just, we want this working.
Interesting. Why would it say that? Oh, because it was
So I was going to say, I wonder.
Yeah.
If you put it back to where it was.
Okay.
I was just going to say, as an aside, what does GitHub Copilot think about fixing it? Or would it be able to help determine, yeah, this is going to throw an exception? I don't know, right? This is where I'm kind of learning how. Okay, so you're going to try fix the code.
Well, it wants me to await it.
All right. And then there was, but except that I'm not sure what it's also doing at the end there.
At the end, I think it's result.
Saying await result. Yeah.
It might be.
That doesn't feel right.
Shrink the code a little bit. No. Oh, read next async.
Oh, I see. Interesting. Oh, did you freeze? Maybe?
No. Maybe I did. Why am I frozen?
All right. No, I'm just curious. At least you're still talking, so.
Not good. Okay. Let's see. So let's take a look. That's unfortunate. My camera's frozen. Uh-oh. Oh, you're still there. Okay.
Yeah, I'm still here.
All right. Doesn't like that. Why am I, why am I frozen?
Yeah.
It's not seen that as a way they sync. I don't know. This seems. This
If
has
you
to be a salt. Go ahead.
if we think we can get back that as a list and then return the list, that's fine.
Yeah. It's interesting. My camera's frozen, but you can still see my screen.
Yeah.
What's that going to give us? That's going to give us feed iterator. An iterator to go through the items.
What
It
are our
doesn't.
options there when you container dot? Yeah.
Oh, container dot. All right.
We're basically trying to get all the items in the container, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, there's read container async. Oh, shoot. Sorry.
That's
Well,
container
it reads
properties.
container properties.
Right.
Yeah, that's not going to help us. Delete. There's get. Change feed. And that's what we tried was get query item link queryable. Oh, I see what it's saying. So it said we could use that, but we would also need to include the extension method to feed iterator, which is what the item query iterator is giving us anyway.
Okay, so get item link queryable returns an ordered queryable, but then there was one get item query iterator, which you think maybe jumps straight to the feed iterator.
Yeah, that's what we got. That's what we're just trying. So it returns a feed iterator of type T.
Right. Okay.
Creates a query for items under a container in an Azure Cosmos database using a SQL statement. So that's okay. So that's what it was trying to do, was to give us.
It's funny,
which is why it wanted to.
I think the way you said it, the way you said it was "Why am I frozen?" is a little. It was humorous, actually. Somebody noted in the comments.
I agree.
See, why am I frozen?
So I think here we could use the SQL query text, right? So this is just as a string. So why am I saying select star from C, right? We're not running. If we were running, we can do it in the other one. Let's do that. So if I go here and I say, see how it has this here?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So we can basically take that and, oh, I went the wrong way. You can't see that. Try that one. There we go. So that's what we're doing. And then we could put a where clause on top of it if we wanted to. But for at least right now, we're going to try and see if we can just get them all back. So that's that. Results okay. So then what would this give us?
That gives you a feed iterator. So now I think you have to, what I don't know is if you can say, yeah, you can say read next to sync, which, so that's actually
Now
an
you've got to
iterator. We're
loop
calling
through
it a
it.
result. We
Yeah.
probably want to change the name of it just so it doesn't get
Oh.
confusing. But we just call it an iterator. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Nope.
But now if you say read next async on it, is that going to give you, what is that going to give you exactly?
That gives you a task.
Right. We have to await it.
Response meeting. Yeah.
So I don't know that we want.
No.
Well, hold on. What was that doing?
So once
See, that's what I wanted to know. That's what I wanted to know. Not that I necessarily think it should be task.result, but
right.
I just don't know what comes back from that yet. And so what I was going to do was say, like, just put the parentheses on it. Like, we don't need all the ghost code, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree.
And then await that. So basically, like var results equals await that. And now what I'm wondering is, what is results? And we don't have an async lambda right now. That's true.
Right.
So, so yeah, we have to change that back to an async lambda. But I'm wondering if you hover over the var on line 33.
T is a meeting.
But it's just one meeting. So I don't know for sure if they all have to be. It feels weird, but I don't know for sure if you have to iterate through them. For some reason, that seems like we should be able to get this out in a command that we want to get this so that we can return it.
Right.
That's what I feel like. And here's where I don't know that like I said, I've never used Cosmos DB before. And I actually understand why it's returning things in this nature. Like, that makes sense to me, because if you think about, at least if I think about what Cosmos DB is, being a NoSQL based product, right? Like, this isn't going to be like when we use the SQL client in the past and we send a query and we get back a collection, and the collection's there it is, it's a collection of the items I want. I can just send that back.
Yeah, agreed. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna see if I can flip this camera thingy. I might have to drop and come back, but
Okay.
2 seconds.
Okay. I wonder if this is where we need to get if this would have been a good place to have like live share going here, Visual Studio Live Share. But yeah, so Rich a second ago had some issues where his camera froze, and I think he's trying to get that restored. But unfortunately now, he's not in the StreamYard studio at all. So let's see if he can come back here in a second, because he has the code that we're working on too. So still waiting to see what's happened here. I don't know for sure. Obviously, can't move forward because the code is not on this machine, not on my machine here. But hopefully you can come back in shortly. So yeah, waiting to see if Rich comes back here. That's probably not what I want. Yeah. Here on the Dev Talk Show, we were working through this API here and trying to connect with Osmos. Okay. All right. So you're back and you're moving and all that.
Yeah, something blew up on the OBS side. So,
okay.
Because I run it locally just for the cameras and mics. All right, let's try this again. Let me see if I can share my screen. Yeah, so apologies because I think while I dove into some of the Aspire stuff pre this thing this morning, I didn't do some of the other stuff.
No, I just lost you. Oh no, I didn't lose you. Why? Okay, for some reason, the one thing I don't like about scenes in StreamYard is it, like I said, I've always complained that you can't lock them. So
Yeah.
I feel like what it does is it says, well, you changed something, and it just like on the fly changes it. Okay, so here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get back results. And I think maybe we're thinking about it a little bit too hard. So we have a feed iterator. We have that. Mm-hmm. We got that from the results. That result iterator, that is a feed iterator, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So I think we could think about what we need is we need a list.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that there's a to list that we can just use. I don't know that that's a thing. So I don't know if we maybe have to iterate through it.
And that is
build a list. Like something feels weird about that. I feel like there's.
I agree.
I even wonder, like, what I'm trying to figure out is there a way? Okay, so here's what they did. Something here, right?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So basically, they're trying to. I guess what you were thinking, right? Can we just kind of run through it?
Yeah.
Let me get rid of that.
First of all, we'll see it work. And here's part of the reason why we won't be done here, because here's where things will get interesting. But I am kind of at the let's see it work point. One thing I do want to do is Sam A30 said hi, so I want to make sure we say hi to Sam.
Oh, hey,
and Sam. Appreciate you being here. Now let's see if this works. And so I admit that this is a moment of let's just see if we get the list of meetings back, because there's some things to discuss here in the future. We're not going to tackle it today with the time we have remaining, but we're trying to design an API, and I feel like both you and I, at least at this point, feel like we're sticking to REST conventions. And I actually think that this app is a good candidate for it, because I think we're going to find that we can define things like meeting speakers, users as resources. And if you're in that situation, the classic example is like the movies app, movies, directors, stuff like that, then it's going to fit really well with REST. And but one of the things that happens is so the REST, the HTTP methods give us really good patterns for adding a meeting, deleting a meeting, getting a meeting. But what about listing the meetings?
Right.
So it starts to become a little bit of a wild west there, where one API might page this way and another API might page that way. I'm not trying to suggest that standards aren't evolving, but no one can enforce that. So so what we're going to have to look at later is just imagine, go ahead and run this. Let's see if we get our 4 meetings back, or however many we have. Then we have to ask ourselves at some point, what do we want this response to look like?
Yeah.
Do we want it to, what if there's 4,000 meetings?
We don't want to wait for that to happen. Yeah.
Right. You don't want somebody to say like, oh, look at this silly API that returns I'm just going to start hammering it and make it blow up. So, for now, I
Yeah.
think it is okay that we're just gonna splat out the 4 meetings, I hope. That's all we're looking
Hmm.
for, is we just want a request that's just meetings. That's it. And I think that's fine. But we will have to work through how is this gonna work? And I wonder what inspiration we can take from maybe some other APIs, or we can find some good articles for folks to read, and for us to read and maybe take inspiration from, to say, okay, here's how we're going to page, here's what the defaults are going to be, and then here's even some of our access control to prevent bad actors from saying like, haha, I'm going to make you return them all, ha 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 ha, right? And try to blow things up. So
All right, let's see what we got.
yep. Okay, honestly, perfect. It's what we wanted.
Yeah, it's an array of individual items.
Yeah, this
Now,
is what we'd expect. But go ahead. Yeah, I think you already started to have some comments, which is good.
well, I'm wondering if I just want to see if it could, we say read next and maybe just do this here. If I say result iterator dot read, I only get read next. That's I was hoping that there was, much like when I was going through the code here, much like this here where I've got a read item async.
Yeah.
Is there read items async?
Right.
And that's it, but that's on the container. So maybe we need to look at that a little differently and say container dot read item stream, read many items.
Okay. I don't know what read many items does, but okay.
Reads multiple items from a container using ID and partition key values.
Interesting.
And
it's almost like, is that building a query for you? I don't know. We'd have to maybe be interesting to go look at what it's doing. So some of the ghost code, I think, is a little odd. For example,
in which part and what I was just doing?
Yeah, like, let's see. While the iterator has more results, that's fine. But what happens if you what is result set right now? Because it's a var, so we have to look and see what it is. It's a feed responsive meeting that might be nullable. Okay. What happens if you take result off of there? Because here's the problem. Oh, I know why it's doing it, because we still haven't made this an async lambda. Mm-hmm. That's why the ghost code went for that. So, because the main thing is that you get nervous about, at least I do. I get nervous about result being on there. So take result off. Let's make this, I think we can make this an async lambda just by putting async in front of Cosmos client at the top, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay. And so now we're not going to be able to for each anymore, because result set is now should be something different.
At least I think don't we need this?
Oh, yeah. I guess that's part of it too. Okay, so now let's see. What we're getting now is we're actually getting a response, which is, whether you want to call it a result set or response. So we're getting a response, and we're going through the response and saying, give me each meeting out of the response, and then we're just going to add it to the list. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Now, could we take what's here? See, we can't take what's here because that feed response, there's no way to...
Yeah.
To do what? Result set? Oh, because it's outside the scope. Sorry. Okay. I just couldn't see it. Okay. I mean, it seems a little better.
So I feel like instead of getting hung up on it, we want to look into this and figure out, is there a right way to do it? Part of why if you look at things like the documentation, for example, I'm looking at where am I? I'm gonna have to try and get this in the show notes. I am in the Azure Cosmos DB for NoSQL documentation, and I'm in the developer guide for .NET, and it says work with items, and it talks about how to query items. So I'll make sure I'll get this in here, and I can present it real quick if you think that helps, instead of me talking it through like I'm reading you all a comic book.
Or just Discord me the link, and I'll. Either way. Although it's probably quicker now for you to go ahead and do it.
Yeah, because I think I can switch back pretty quickly too.
Yeah.
So query items using a SQL query asynchronously. Okay. So it builds a SQL query, no problem, similar to what we just did. Very similar.
Yep.
And then the ghost code even is suggested, well, let's while through, there's more results. And then what this did is they, this is just a fragment of code, so we're not seeing that they're in an async method, but they must be, because there's an await here. And then look, they did the same thing. Iterated through. We just chose to add it to a list.
To a list.
Where here they're like, throw it out to the console. So I think the same thing happened here with this other one, where they say, hey, you could also use query definition, which is great. But in the end, it still comes to this part. So I think I'm not going to sit here and say, yep, that's it, that's the way. But we are in a NoSQL database. Right. And so what comes back, we're saying that it's going to fit. Yeah, it could be JSON, but we're saying it's going to fit neatly in this. In our case, it's meeting. In this case, it's product. We're saying that it's going to fit neatly. Do I have to? Okay, I have to remove the other stream. Okay, fine. So we're saying that it's going to fit neatly in a meeting. I wonder now if you added another item, not that you should do it now, but it might be interesting to explore, and we could show folks. If you added another item to that collection that was just totally off base from a meeting, what the heck does this SDK do? Right?
You mean another property? So the meeting...
No, like another item, because you could go into Cosmos's Data Explorer, can't you, and just say, well, this is going to be a meeting though, because our API is well behaved, and it's going to. What if you just threw in some other thing? I don't know what happens there. What I'm getting at is I'm trying to understand. There must be a reason why we don't have an API that might work the same way as a SQL client that just says like, hey, here's all the results and they're strongly typed, knock yourself out. Right. I guess what I'm getting at, here's what I'm getting at is, what if you were using Dapper or an Entity Framework Core? The iteration step would have gotten taken care of for you. So that begs the question, what happens if we use EF Core for Cosmos?
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so I guess what I want to stress to folks is I don't think that we're doing anything wrong. We're learning how to do some stuff. There's a lot of technologies that Rich and I think both admitted that we're throwing them together into a production app in a way that I certainly haven't done before. And I don't know. I mean, it's talk about drinking from the fire hose. It's like, hey, let's do all these things at the same time, including like a Blazor WebAssembly based app, right? Let's just do it all at once. So, and
so let's run that. So all I did was basically write something into, just write a record into, and that record is technically not a meeting because the type is different. Right. And it's just a thing. So let's see if it comes back. It probably should, is what I'm thinking. But
do you think it's that type?
I don't think we have anything in there that lets. So here's two things. I think it's Cosmos is going to bring it back.
Yes.
I think it may fail when it tries to convert it to the type of meeting.
Yes, because we're trying to strongly type. Yeah. We'll see. Here we go. So no. Well, it just tried to turn it into a meeting.
Yes.
Okay. And whatever didn't fit is null.
Yeah. Okay. And that might be because if we go back to, we haven't showed this, but if we go back to what we did last time with a meeting object, we said the type of this is going to be that. So it's just a get. Even though
ID was the only thing that fit. Everything else didn't. So it said, okay. That's it. Yeah. Now, I'm not suggesting that we're going to pollute that with things other than meetings.
Well,
but maybe I'm wrong.
My thought was having two different document structures, and the differentiation between the two is the type. So that's why this class having a type of meeting versus a type of an attendee or a member, whatever we wind up calling.
But they will be in the same container.
I think so.
So we're still not sunk because the query right now is really basic. It's just select star.
Yeah.
So the query would be where type is meeting, I suppose. So you have that on line 32 right now. You have select star from C. And I guess it's where C dot type equals meeting, I suppose. And then that member would go away.
That would.
I don't think you have to put it in quotes. I don't think so.
Oh, because it's already in quotes. Where?
Yeah, I think you're okay to just say C dot type.
Yep. There you go.
And then maybe equals, and I suppose, yeah. Okay. I suppose we could have tried this out in the Data Explorer first, but why not just try it in the app? Okay, so yeah.
Did not like that.
Oh yeah. We killed it pretty bad there. That's nice. I wonder what that result iterator looks like right now. Like, I'm just curious. Is it null? I don't even know.
It's not giving me any watch. Oh, I'm sorry, not watch locals. Yeah, they're all. Oh, when it stops debugging, you can't look at it.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So I don't know what the query is for that. I don't know if the Data Explorer will help you figure that out.
I think it will.
And then at least we would know. We could quote unquote fix it. But that's an interesting question for me. Is I'm wondering now some best practices for dealing with this in your code, so that you don't blow things up. But then I don't know.
Yeah. And maybe it's a double equals.
Yeah, I don't know the syntax at the moment.
Why? So that got rid of it.
Do you think it had to be double quotes, or are you going to try singles just to see? Because if the singles are the problem, we can solve that problem. We do have the technology in C#. No?
That's cool. Okay. So it's the double equal.
Okay. All right. That's fine. So yeah, we have some things to work out here. I am always interested to know what helps us in the box, so to speak, such as like what's in the box of the Cosmos DB SDK, what's in the box of ASP.NET Core, because we're going to want to work out how that list works. You can imagine that if we have all kinds of users, we're certainly not just going to want to splat them out, especially if you're saying doing a feature of like who's coming to the meeting. There's a difference between 5 people coming and 5,000, and how do you want to display that on the website? And so we'll work that out. But that's cool. We basically have 3 items in. We can get a meeting, we can post a new meeting, we can list the meetings. We could always add a delete later. And then the interesting thing about something like a delete and a post is I feel like that's where we start to think about, or it could be, maybe not today, but soon, we start to think about authentication, authorization, because only certain users should be allowed to do that. So I'm really excited to get to the point where you or I log into the Blazor app. I presume we're going to want to use external auth, which is like kind of our favorite. So that way the app doesn't have to know anything about usernames and passwords. Just perhaps our Entra ID, done, grab that. but then flow that through to the API,
right?
So that the API now acts as Rich, acts as me, and then says, yes, they are allowed to do these things. And in trying to figure out how to unify all that will be really cool, and I bet helpful for a lot of folks. So,
I think so. I think it'll be fun.
Yeah. All right. So we plowed through some stuff today. There are things I really liked. I love how a lot of the code, all of the code that was in there for the web app. So we have an Aspire app host. This is where what I need to do for us is I think I need to find a way to have a whiteboard set that we can just switch to and the whiteboard's ready to draw on. Okay. Because otherwise I'm like, we're doing this thing, right? Where we have an Aspire app host that is orchestrating, maybe orchestrating is a better term, a web app, and we have a web API. Those apps are all in place. The web app isn't doing a ton right now. We're mostly just dealing with the API. In the API, we need to connect to Cosmos. That orchestration is also being handled by Aspire. And we took all of the connectivity, the setup, basically, the how, where do you find it? It's not in the web API anymore. It's being handled by the Aspire orchestration. That's good. That's where we want to be.
Right.
So we're kind of living up to like, hey, this is how Aspire is supposed to help us. So I think we have tons of questions and ways of doing things to figure out. So we will get to that, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think?
I think it's a journey. I think we got a bunch of good foundational stuff here, and we got things wired up the right way so that we can move it forward. So yeah, I'm excited for where we're going.
All right. Cool. Perfect. Well, listen, I know, look, we had some people join us today. Let's see. I don't think I've seen, and I apologize for getting names wrong, but Sakil, I hope I have that right. Jumped in at the right time. I thought that was funny, and thank you for joining us. And then Sam A30 said hi, and we really appreciate you being here. So thanks for being here with us live. And if you're watching in the future on YouTube, let us know what you think in the comments. I will probably do a little bit of editing for some of the spots we got into, just the dead air. So if you're watching on YouTube, hopefully at some point in the future, you didn't see any of it and you don't know what I'm talking about right now. So
there you go. Cool.
All right. Well, it's about 9:15 here on the US East Coast on a Friday. Everybody have a great weekend. Let's see. It's spring break for a lot of folks here in the US. And so holiday time for folks. I know that everybody here in the house is off today. My daughter isn't, and my wife's a high school teacher, so they're home and looking forward to a fun weekend. So hopefully you have a relaxing weekend lined up, Rich.
Yeah, should be nice out. I hope to start doing some of the outside stuff. So
oh yeah,
should be fun.
Well, here we go. It's that time of year. So, all right then. Well, thanks for guiding us through that today, Rich. I know we had you on your screen on. We worked through it. Thank you very much. It's always great. Yeah. Hopefully you all had fun watching. Yeah.
Yeah, I had fun doing it. So it's
cool.
It's good to explore this because I really want to kind of get some of the muscle memory around some of those things. So
it's one thing to watch and read, and now you're doing it for real on a project with your requirements. I've always said that the problem with, so if you're, hopefully if you stayed to the end and you're learning anything in software, doing tutorials and boot camps and trainers they're great. What you'll find though, is that why did it seem so easy then? And it's a little bit harder now because now we're trying to solve your problem. And there's going to be something different and unique. I don't care how small your problem is that wasn't covered in the tutorial or the trainer or the learning. And that's where the fun begins, but fight through it, get through that. And that's where you'll really mature as a developer, I think. So, all right.
Sounds cool.
Let's see if I can get everything set up to get out of here. And I think so. So, hey, everybody, for Rich, I'm Chris, and we will see you all next time on the Dev Talk Show. not do anything I wanted.